In the most basic version of the hero's journey, the hero has to meet a figure known as the mentor. I think the ubiquitous image is that of an old man with a beard, often one who is just a little bit more magical than maybe we pick up on the first time around, but definitely one who has a secret. In fact, in the most standard version of the hero's journey, the mentor is often the person delivering the call to adventure. It's Gandalf knocking on the door of Bag End, or the letter arriving from Hogwarts. And honestly, in the 21st century, if an old man with a weird hat kept knocking on my door and refused to go away, I'd probably go for calling the police over a call to adventure. So today I want to talk about the mentor, how that figure plays out in our favorite stories, books, and movies, about archetypes in general and where they come from, and most importantly, what you and I can learn in our own lives about the mentor archetype. But in order to answer the question, what is an archetype from a psychological angle, I want to start by asking the question, what is an archetype in the context of a story? See, an archetype is almost a form of stereotype. They're a ubiquitous figure that transcends different stories, even at times different genres. In fact, we see these figures playing out in stories all across the world, often where people didn't even read each other's stories. They seem to spring up from the very foundation of stories themselves. There's a lot of different types of archetypes that you can find in movies. I think of the bully, maybe the ubiquitous 80s older brother who tends to bully the weaker protagonist around, or just the intimidating figure who controls everyone around them through fear, like Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. There's the friendly beast, the physically intimidating, misunderstood character like Saphira from the Aragon series, or one of my personal favorites, Bruce from Finding Nemo.
Hello.
There's the innocent, or the dreamer. They're the innocent person in the world who wants to believe that the world around them is just as innocent as them. And no matter how much people try to take advantage of them, their own goodness tends to pervade, like Tom Hanks in Forrest Gump, or one of my personal favorites, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. See, each time we encounter one of those people in, say, a film or a book, we already know inherent things about them. Depending on who you ask and how you slice it, there's between 8 and 12, or in a certain sense, an unlimited number of story archetypes. When we encounter one of those people, we know that in maybe a high-powered action movie and they go into the briefing room and there's somebody who's really skinny and wearing a tie and doesn't look like they belong, we know that they're probably going to use their intelligence to outsmart somebody along the way. Maybe they're helping the hero, like Q in James Bond, or maybe they turn out to be the archetype of the evil mastermind, like Vector in Despicable Me. We know, in the context of the story, the general rules that these characters have to play by. We know when we find the archetype of the star-crossed lovers that they don't get happily ever afters. We know with Romeo and Juliet, or Lancelot or Guinevere, or even Daisy and Jay in The Great Gatsby, that there is no real future for them. That's how the star-crossed lover archetype plays out. Their love is beautiful and provoking, but it's also inherently tragic. And when we encounter the archetype of the outcast as the hero of the story, we know that whether it's Shrek or Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or How the Grinch Stole Christmas, that by the end of the movie, the outcast is going to find a place where they belong. They're going to go from being the person on the outskirts of society to finding a unique place in society, often saving everybody along the way. So why is it that these archetypes are so familiar? So I can't speak for anybody else, but there was no point in time when anybody sat me down and taught me what the outcast was or the star-crossed lovers. Nobody said, hey, when you're watching a movie, a good movie is one where the characters play by these rules or use this kind of way of thinking with the archetype. And yet, ubiquitously around the world through different cultures, these story principles seem to transcend everything from time to language. Despite the fact that most of us never go through the process of reading Jung or John Truby to understand how these archetypes play out in stories, we tend to inherently hate it when characters break the rules. Those tend to be the movies that we just don't connect with, or the movies that have the big budget sci-fi explosions and CGI and just don't impact us. So the central idea of archetypes in stories is that archetypes actually transcend stories. And to illustrate that, I want to talk about the outcast archetype, and actually what I think the simplest story of the outcast archetype is The Ugly Duckling. The Ugly Duckling, like many fairy tales, I think is at its core nothing more than an archetype. I think the simplest version of the story of the ugly duckling is that there's a bunch of ducklings born and one of them is really ugly. And that duckling is rejected until one day it becomes a swan. And the swan is a beautiful figure. See, there's thousands of variations on the story of the ugly duckling, but all of them play on one central theme, and that is the thing being rejected, finding its place in the world. Something that was once ugly and turned aside, becoming a thing of immense beauty and uniqueness. See, fairy tales as a whole tend to play with immensely archetypal stories. In fact, well, you might turn on a Marvel movie and see 12 different archetypes playing out on screen. In a fairy tale, you'll tend to only see one. So where do archetypes come from? Well, the first person to really put meaningful research into the psychological impact of archetypes was Carl Jung. In his book, The Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious, Jung talks about the archetypes that seem to be latent to people. It's kind of a crude analogy, but archetypes could almost be described as software programs that come pre-installed with every human. Those archetypes are all things within ourselves that we can tap into, or sometimes we tap into without even meaning to. Like, say, the warrior archetype, somebody who is concerned with justice in the world. I think we've all experienced or seen somebody who's otherwise quite docile become aggressive and spring into action in a moment when somebody was either in danger or some injustice was being done. People who are otherwise passive and not inclined to violence at all can become immensely aggressive. And you could ask, well, where is that coming from? Well, in one sense, it's coming from the warrior archetype, some part within themselves that is so concerned with justice and the way that the world should work. You could also maybe have experienced the flip side. The lover archetype is the part of us that tends to be focused on empathy or trying to understand other people's perspectives in the world. And you see the scene in movies all the time, and I've even seen it in real life, where like the big burly mechanic who doesn't seem to have an emotion to spare suddenly breaks down in tears at some folly in the world or some immense act of beauty. Well, you could say that this person who is normally very gruff and doesn't express a whole lot just tapped into the lover archetype for the first time. But see, these archetypes aren't always positive things, especially when they're immature or underdeveloped. In this book by Moore and Gillette, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, they talk about how many of the archetypes can reside in an immature form. So an example would be, in real life, the bully archetype would be an underdeveloped form of the warrior archetype, or the tyrant ruler, kind of the person who does so many things out of spite and just seems to be trying to get a reaction from everybody around them, would be an underdeveloped form of the king archetype. And that leads me to my personal favorite archetype, both in stories and in psychology, an archetype known as the magician or the wizard, or my favorite term for them, the mentor. See, the mentor is, first of all, defined by their skill. They're defined by their knowledge and wisdom of the world in which they live and the things that they need to know to reside in that world well. In real life, that knowledge or wisdom of the world could be in your craft or trade. It could be in marketing or business, or it could be in book writing or parenting or any other area of expertise. See, often we think of experts in their field and we say, well, if you're an expert writer, then you should go and write books. And that's a good and fine thing, but the mentor does something else. They take that wisdom and that experience and they start to apply it to other people. So the mentor isn't out there to prove themselves. When we tap into the mentor archetype, you're not tapping into some part of yourself that is an expert in order to better your own life. You're tapping into some part of yourself that is an expert in order to help a different hero along the way. Now, in the course of our everyday lives, we don't necessarily always get the luxury of not working on our craft. Many of us, myself included, need to go to work. We need to put in the time and effort of making the things that we are called to make. We need to put in the time and effort into fulfilling our responsibilities and making the things that we need to make. But I often think about the mentor archetype, and that is beginning to look around for the people in your life that you can help. I think that palpably something changes within myself when I begin to view the world that way, which I in many ways so rarely do. See, despite my inability to do it as often as I would like, I find that the world begins to palpably change when I approach it with the attitude of the mentor. When I say, well, I have gathered some skill, I've read some books, I know some things, whether that be about something as intricate or at times complicated as digital marketing, or something as simple as navigating the modern world in your 20s. When you begin to look for the people around you who might need somebody to show up with a call to adventure or show up at the right time with a solution, You begin to channel that part of you that can bring wisdom. In fact, there's one last defining thing I want to call out about mentors in our favorite books and movies, and that is, in many cases, in fact I would say in most cases, the mentor in some ways used to be the hero. See, in Star Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi was once a Jedi himself. He was once somebody who had their own adventure and arc. It's only now that Obi-Wan has completed his role as the hero that he can mentor Luke along his own way. See, when you begin to take on the mentor archetype, you begin to take on maturity. You begin to reflect on the things that have come before. In fact, in some ways, Jung would say that the hero is an immature archetype. It's why we need sequels to stories. The hero is somebody who can slay the dragon and take the crown, but they're not somebody who can keep it. They're too immature. They have to progress forward into becoming the king or the mentor for somebody else in order to take on real maturity, in order to find real peace. So no matter where you are on your personal journey, whether you're on the sequel or trilogy or series of your own quests and you need to begin to look for somebody else to help out along the way, look for ways to channel the mentor archetype in your life, or if you're in the thick of your own quest and you need a little bit of help and you need to go read some of the letters on our website, I hope that you could find ways to bring the mentor archetype into your life to help yourself and to help those around you.
You know, I did feel something. I could almost see the remote.
That's good. You've taken your first step into a larger world.
Hey everybody, my name is Zach from the Hero's Journal. Thank you so much for watching that. I have spent a lot of times trying to slug through Carl Jung's books. They're amazing, but they're so thick and I love nerding out on them. I have a couple of things to run over in this last minute. We're doing something right now called Magic Month. It's a 32-day transformation that we're in the middle of, but there's still time to get involved. Each and every day has a daily side quest, reflection question, and we're doing it all together as a community in the Heroes Quarters leading up to our Kickstarter launch of our brand new journal. So you can click the link in the description to download Magic Month and join us. Additionally, we're going to put a link down there to the letters from the mentor. They live on our website. Each and every one comes with a unique comic designed by our fantastic artist Ryan, and each one is just a different letter based off of what was happening that week or based off of what we are reading or something that we think is inspiring. So you can click that link, you can sign up there. Actually, if you sign up for Magic Month, you'll also sign up for the letters from the mentor every Tuesday morning. Finally, we made the Hero's Journal to help people discover how the themes of storytelling and archetypes are playing out in their lives. It's an immensely practical way to inject some of that wisdom and perspective into your day-to-day. So if you're interested in learning more, reading the reviews, or ordering yours, you can visit theheroesjournal.co. Finally, we make videos every week talking about story theory, our favorite fandoms, and productivity. So if this video was helpful for you, it would really help us out if you would hit like, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.